Supposed Bible contradiction. Did Jesus name the wrong high priest? In Mark 2, Jesus allows his disciples to go through grain fields to gather food on the Sabbath. The Pharisees see this and criticize Jesus for allowing his disciples to work on the Sabbath. Jesus responds by explaining the purpose of the Sabbath and gives an example of how David entered the house of God and ate the bread of the presence. However, in giving the example, Jesus says the high priest was Abiathar. But in 1 Samuel 21, the priest that gave David bread was Ahimelech. So did Jesus misspeak and name the wrong high priest from this event? This issue is famous because Bart Ehrman says it was the first step that led him away from Christianity. But is this really a big issue? For one thing, Mark 2:26 may only say this event happened in the days of Abiathar, which would be true, as Abiathar was alive at this time and fled to David just after Saul killed Ahimelech. He was Ahimelech's son and became a high priest that reigned for several decades after this. And Abiathar most likely would have been present during this episode with David and the bread. Some reply that the Greek phrase in Mark should be translated as when Abiathar was the high priest, meaning it should be translated to state Jesus thought Abiathar was already high priest. But the scholar Dan Wallace says this rendering is possible, but it's not a necessary reading. The construction epi plus genitive noun is frequently used with a temporal sense outside of Mark, with a meaning similar to in the days of. BDAG lists numerous biblical and patristic references under epi with a genitive for time, all in the sense of in the time of, under kings or other rulers. For example, Luke 4:27, Luke 3:2, and even Mark 2:26. So if we apply the principle of charity, one can argue the phrase means in the time of Abiathar, and does not necessarily mean he was already high priest at the time. This would be like saying that during the life of Augustus, Cleopatra and Mark Antony died after they were defeated in battle. But their deaths happened before Octavian was given the name of Augustus. But generalizing like this, and referring to Octavian by his more well-known name Augustus, does not mean one made an error in reporting the history. The scholar Edward D. Andrews concurs with Dan Wallace and adds an example to help support this understanding. He first cites other verses where similar Greek phrasing likely means in the time of, and notes, Jesus did not state that Abiathar was high priest at the time of the incident, only in the time of. Contextually, Abiathar is actually present when the event took place. Then Andrews notes that Ehrman himself expresses himself in a similar way that Jesus did, and it doesn't mean that Ehrman made an historical error. In his book Misquoting Jesus, Ehrman states, Jesus wants to show the Pharisees that Sabbath was made for humans, not humans for the Sabbath, and so reminds them of what the great King David had done when he and his men were hungry. Now they went into the temple when Abiathar was the high priest, and ate the showbread, which was only for the priest to eat. Andrews notes that Ehrman refers to David as King David, but David was not yet king in 1 Samuel 21. Saul was still king. Ehrman also says they went into the temple, but the temple wasn't built until Solomon's reign. They went into the tabernacle at Nob. So if Ehrman can use this language and not be accused of making an historical error, why couldn't Jesus use similar phraseology to refer to the general time and mention a well-known high priest as the reference point? He is merely referring to the time of Abiathar, who was a well-known high priest. Andrews says, here we have a world-renowned Bible scholar who uses a loose reference in his book and expects that his audience will understand what he means by his way of wording things. Was Ehrman technically chronologically wrong? Yes, in the strictest sense of things, if one wishes to be unreasonable. However, if we recognize this is an acceptable way of human expression, then he is not wrong, because he knows his audience will understand his loose reference, and so it goes with Jesus as well. Most importantly is the context of which Jesus uses this example. Abiathar was more well known for adhering to the law than Ahimelech. In the context of Mark 2, Jesus is essentially saying back to the Pharisees, look what took place in the presence of the upstanding Abiathar, and he did not see any issue with it. Are you a better judge of what is lawful than the great high priest Abiathar we all know so well? Since in the time of Jesus, Abiathar was well known for upholding the law, it would have made more sense to reference him in the context of keeping the law properly, over mentioning Ahimelech. Ahimelech did not have the same reputation Abiathar had for holding fast to the law. So in context of Mark 2, with Jesus' overall message, it does make more sense to mention Abiathar. We have to remember the context from where this verse comes from. Also, the scholar Maurice studied the Aramaic behind the Greek phrase in Mark and suggests the wording may be rendered too literal in Greek. The Aramaic phrasing may only indicate that he was a great or renowned priest. Abiathar was much more important than Ahimelech, and his presence may reasonably be deduced from the narrative in 1 Samuel. High priest is an accurate description of what Abiathar was famous as, and does not necessarily carry the implication clear in Mark's Greek that he was high priest at the time of the incident. Furthermore, high priest may have meant only that he was one of the most important priestly authorities, the high priest of the later Markan narrative. Abiathar was in either case outstanding, and correct observance of the law in his days could safely be assumed. In other words, Jesus in Aramaic may only have been referring to Abiathar as a renowned priest, and not necessarily the official high priest. But either way, the point of the passage is to mention Abiathar, since he was the high priest known for upholding the law so well. Ahimelech did not have the same type of high reputation. So given the context, the grammar, and a charitable understanding of human expression, this passage is hardly an issue. Thus this supposed contradiction can be resolved.